Good evening, and it really is evening, hence the appallingly bad lighting. I rely very heavily on natural light, but this is a preparation for anyone who's watching, because in just a week I'm going on a road trip up the North Queensland coast. I'm probably not going to stop recording. I'm probably going to keep recording videos as I finish books or stories along the way. I'm thinking of doing a couple of short story collections as I go. That worked last year. However, bad light, erratic light, I'm giving you mental preparation. The book of the day, however, as you saw from the thumbnail, is the most amazing, the most spectacular Little Fuzzy by H. Beam Piper. What a book. I absolutely love this book. I think I've seen it called a novella elsewhere. It's a very short book, 174 pages. It was published in the 80s, oh no, printing history. It was published in the 1960s. My edition, however, is from 1985. Now, I don't know how I found out about Little Fuzzy, but I somehow did. Maybe I read it from a library, or I got to read a little bit of it, didn't finish it. I remember as a teenager begging people to get me the Little Fuzzies. And then finally someone I knew went to America and they bought me Little Fuzzy. And as a bonus, they bought me the book that I didn't even know exists. That's the next one's Fuzzy Sapiens. This is one of my favourite books. It's been a comfort read since I got it. Brand new. It's actually survived pretty well because I did the thing. I've just recently discovered that you're not meant to contact books if you're a book collector, but I'm primarily a reader who collects books. It's worked very well for Little Fuzzy. This has been travelled around the world more than many people. It's travelled all around Australia more than most people. And it is still relatively good condition, relatively unfaded and clean. It is as close to the perfect book as I've ever read. There's those books that you return to time and time again because no part of the reading experience is not wonderful. Every time you go back to them, you still get the same feelings or different feelings, but good feelings. You often find new things no matter how many times you've read them. That's Little Fuzzy to me. I would appear to be niche in that. I know a lot of people science fiction readers specifically, who've read Little Fuzzy and enjoyed it, liked it. Very few would rate it as one of their top all-time books, which is how I would rate it. I don't think that a single phrase, a single paragraph, a single word is wasted or misused. It feels like every single thing has got just perfection about it. That's me. Not too many other people have thought that. And to me, this is also absolute science fiction. I've heard people calling it space opera, and I've heard people calling it fantasy, a whole heap of other things, speculative fiction. I would argue this is absolutely science fiction. But a lot of people who are classic science fiction readers, they think of science fiction as having to be astrophysics or mathematics or engineering. They think the strong STEM sciences. But for me, the sciences I've always loved have been the ologies. This one has got zoology, it's got paleontology, it's got ecology, it's got the question of nature versus nurture, and it's got the question of intelligence. It was a 1980s when I first read this. It is now 2024, and people at university in the first and even second years are still being asked, how do you define intelligence? That is a question that will never grow old, because our interpretation of intelligence is so very human-centric. It's like, well, we are intelligent, and any other animal out there that is going to be considered intelligent has to be like humans. But that's an endless debate, and it was already a debate that had spent a lot of time in the 80s. The debate for intelligence in other species is a lot of what this is about. But again, zoology, you've got ecology, you've got psychology, you've got a bit of geology, good geology actually. So all my favourite ologies, and it's packaged in this beautiful writing with excellent characters. There are so many characters in here compared to many other books, including H.G. Beam Piper books. After reading The Fuzzies, I've read several others of his that were sort of, I think Space Viking or Galactic Viking was one of them. This is still his favourite book for me that I've read. Now, why is it so very niche? I think it's got a lot of things that I personally enjoy. Not everyone will. Now, when I was a teenager, I read a lot of Westerns. I liked the whole genre. I read them for years. I read a lot of them. At some stage, probably in my 20s, I just stopped reading Westerns and I've never really gone back to them. But in my teens, when I read this, that was still a genre I very much liked. And in Little Fuzzy, we've got a frontier-style planet. It takes place on a planet called Zarathustra, which when it starts is a Class 3 uninhabited planet. So you've got a very solid galaxy with human expansion described within these pages. They've discovered a number of other intelligent species that have been defined as intelligent on different planets. But the majority of planets aren't. And the way the classification of the planets goes is never spelled out in any great detail, but just enough to make it all feel real, like there's a whole universe and a whole culture behind it, which I really liked. So with Zarathustra, when we start, Class 3 uninhabited planet, a company called the Chartered Zarathustra Company pretty much owns the whole planet. It has extensive rights to develop it, to exploit it, to profit from it, without any real influence or interference from a colonial government that is ruled from some federation based on Earth. So they pretty much own the entire planet. They have complete rights to it and to one of the moons, but the other moon, Xerxes, is a base for military forces that only report back to the federal Earth agency, whatever it is. Now, that's the planet as it starts, as we start out on it, but we don't really start out with all of that information. We start out with Jack Holloway. Jack Holloway is our main protagonist. He's an old guy, he's in his 70s, he's a bit of a loner. We learn that he's kicked all the way around the galaxy, many different planets, done a lot of different things. What he's doing here is he's a gemstone miner on Zarathustra. And I love the background for the geology. It talks about how back in the day, Zarathustra was as a world was covered in oceans, and there were these large jellyfish-like creatures. When they died, they sunk to the bottom. The silt compressed them until they ended up as jelly bean sized. And some of them are intensely what's the word? Thermo. Anyway, when they get warm, they glow, basically. So now I need to find the phrase that they use here, and I'm afraid to try and remember it because my memory's terrible. And thermofluorescent. The entombed jellyfish little beings of dense stone, some of them by some ancient biochemical quirk, were intensely thermofluorescent. Worn as gems, they glowed from the wearer's body heat. Just love the way, I love the writing in this book, which is unlike any of his other books that I've read. In Fuzzy Sapience, which I'm reading now, his writing's good, workmanship, but it doesn't have the beauty of this. So yes, anyway, we start with Jack Holloway. Jack Holloway is doing his thing. He gets back to his lonely campsite. Well, it's not a campsite, it's got a full house, and he's been working out of it. He's got all the geology equipment. He's not just a fossicker. He gets home and he finds a little creature that is remarkably like the drawn description on this cover. Not often the covers get it right, but I think they've just managed to draw Little Fuzzy perfectly here. It's described as a 2 foot tall, furry animal with very large eyes. And Jack Holloway adopts it and is amazed by how intelligent it is. He calls it Little Fuzzy. And then one day Fuzzy goes away and he comes back with his family, with Mama Fuzzy, a tiny little baby Fuzzy, and a few others. And it rolls on from there. because Little Fuzzy can do amazing things. In this day and age, we've got a lot of debate over the ability to visualize something as being inside a container and to learn to unscrew it. Can you learn to unscrew it by trial and error? Octopus have done it. Can you learn to unscrew it by watching another animal do it? Can you learn to unscrew it watching another animal from a different species doing it? So those are the gradations of intelligence that we are still struggling with today and which are fascinating, and which in 1962 H.B. Piper wrote about in Little Fuzzy. So you've got this Wild West type scenario. Jack Holloway's living out in the bush. At some point they mentioned that the last person who drew a gun on Holloway, they called it suicide. In his 70s, but still a very good shot. You've got this sort of roughish frontier style to the whole planet. And I think H.B. Piper really quite admired that frontier mentality. It comes across as something that he's enjoying writing about. And yet Mallory's Port, which is the main town on Zarathustra, is on the up and up. It's got sky rises. The Chartered Zarathustra company is doing well enough that it's actually becoming quite wealthy. And then Jack Holloway shows his fuzzies to a, this is funny, he's an ecologist. They call him a naturalist. Of course, 2020, a naturalist means someone who likes taking off all their clothes and running around in the wild. But back then, what they meant was an actual ecologist. Ben Rainsford, together they put together a report, and thinking nothing of it except that they're really excited by how intelligent Little Fuzzy is, they send this report off. When it's seen by the company, however, they realize with horror that if these little animals are intelligent enough to be classed as an intelligent species, then Zarathustra is no longer a class 3 uninhabited planet, it's a class 4 inhabited planet, and the Chartered Zarathustra company has no hold whatsoever. So they send out a hit team basically to disprove the claims of intelligence. That doesn't end well, and it ends up in law courts. I love, and always have loved, reading books set in court. Friends and Court and all those other ones. I used to have the whole set, now I've only got one or two. But I just love reading court sessions, and I always have. It didn't occur to me until a couple of years ago when I read someone else's review on this book. Not everyone loves that, but I absolutely adored it. The court session that vindicates Jack Holloway at the end of the book is marvelous. So between the Western and the ecologies and the courts, this is a book that never sets a foot wrong, in my estimation. I absolutely love it. It fits in flawlessly with my interests. The writing is gorgeous. There are so many parts of it. I could actually sit down and read from this almost every page and find something that I think is beautifully written. There is humour without it trying too hard to be funny. There are intelligent turns of phrase and debate without it trying too hard to be scientific. There's Jack Holloway as a very, very likeable protagonist and a sensible one. That's the thing. While he is this frontiersman geologist, at the same time, he's a very intelligent and very balanced individual. And after having read a few books where none of the individuals seem balanced or even very realistic, having Jack Holloway and other characters like Ruth Orthoris, she's a great character. It's really, really a relief to read one that's this well written. Who do I recommend it to? I'd recommend it to people who like the softer ologies instead of the astrophysics ologies. If you're intrigued by Western style science fiction, then yes, but if you want it to be a straight shoot it up, white hat, bad hat, black hat, good guy, bad guy, then this is not that. It's way too nuanced and way too intellectual in places. So yeah, if you like some Western, if you like some law course, if you like all the ologies, if you want a really intriguing, interesting, absorbing, and very well thought out debate on what intelligence is and isn't, Little Fuzzy, one of my favourite books. If it's one of your favourite books, I think we're in a small and very select club, and I want to hear from you. In any case, comment if you feel like it. Don't hold your breath for the review of Fuzzy Sapiens. It's coming. But, well, I can absolutely inhale this book every time I read it. Fuzzy Sapiens needs a lot more work, and I'm working on it right now. Have a good night. Read good books. Tell me about the good books you're reading. I always like to hear. And thank you for watching.